3, 4. Let me take a look at what do you got. I pull into the speculation station a lot. Speculation station.
Hello and welcome to the Speculation Station podcast.
Welcome.
Where we speculate about stuff, mostly objects.
Mystery objects that one of us brings in each week. This week it's
me, Tom, and Will be speculating on the object, and he'll be coming up with topics for us to talk about.
And then from there we'll go wherever we please.
So let's dive right in with today's object. You ready?
I shall close my eyes.
Yes, you better do.
I'll move my glass away. Shall I present hands together, slightly apart, very far apart?
Tense your muscles. But not your hand muscles, just your arm.
Okay, just my arm muscles, but not my hands. Oh, God, it's heavy. Okay. Now, this is clearly, probably a camera case.
Yeah.
It has a lovely leathery feel to the actual case itself. There's a protrusion where I believe the lens resides, and lots of little kind of clasps and attachments and that keep it together. Oh yeah, that feels good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a look.
Yeah, please do.
Ooh. Okay, let's take a look at this camera. Okay, so it's a real classic old style film camera with all the bells and whistles that you'd hope for it to have. Oh, it feels really cool to hold, and you've got that
it's really
bit
chunky,
where you wind the film round. Oh god, yeah. Okay, have you ever used this?
Yes, I used to use it. I developed photographs of it with my dad in what do you call it? In a dark room with all the different chemicals and whatnot.
Did you have a purpose-made darkroom at home, or did you make one?
My dad got a darkroom, and he got the machine and basically made his own darkroom in the downstairs toilet.
In the downstairs toilet for the creative man on the move. Love it.
Yeah, I would say it had the washing machine and stuff in there as well, so it was like a utility room at the same time. But we used it to. And he got me into photography a little bit. So
How long have you had this camera?
Since I was a teenager, maybe since I was 14, 15.
Okay.
I can't even remember. It was about 10 quid or something. I don't know.
Wow, really?
Maybe I bought it off. I feel like it was either that. I can't quite remember. Either I bought it like second hand, or I was given it because people knew I was into photography or knew I was into that kind of thing at the age. You know, they were like encouraging me to be creative. I feel like one of my uncles could have given it to me, but I actually don't remember. But it was a nice little simple SLR camera that just did its job basically, and it's proper film, classic film. There's no digital aspect to that camera at all.
Do you still have an interest in photography now?
Here and there, but I'm just very good at it. It's just not my thing really. But I certainly, I was really into it. I like the manipulation of images a lot.
What it makes me think of immediately is photojournalism.
Ooh,
because
I like
journalism is such a huge part of our cultural cohesion. It allows us to stay in touch with what's going on both at home and overseas as well, especially in an increasingly turbulent modern society. And I think photojournalism is sometimes a forgotten part of that. We read these articles online, in the news articles, and it's always accompanied by a photo. And you look at the photo and you read the article, but I think the brain gives more credence and precedence to the article itself rather than the photo. But really, there are some shockingly, graphic and stirring photos from the world around.
Well, there's the famous one that, of the kid in the migrant crisis, isn't there? The dead kid washing up on the shore.
Oh, that was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, which made even David Cameron.
And now you mention it, there was also one similar to that recently with a Syrian girl lying / cowering next to the corpse of her baby brother or sister having been bombed. Jesus Christ, yeah. So
war photography is particularly interesting.
Yeah, and these people go out into these incredibly dangerous situations just so that they can bring that information back to us. So that's what I'm going to say for today. That's our big concept, photojournalism.
Fantastic.
Your approach to it is your own butter.
Well, so immediately my angle is, okay, let's tell the story of a war journalist.
Lovely.
A photojournalist, of course. I think we should go on that angle.
Yeah.
Like a journalist in the war, maybe for the shit of it, let's go for the First World War.
Yeah.
When photography would be a little bit less good, when photography was a bit weaker and a little bit more clunky around the edges.
A lot more requisite on your own skill.
Yeah, exactly.
These days, a digital camera, you can kind of set it up and it does a lot of things for you.
Because First World War photography, both film and and still image, both of those were very difficult at the time to do and to achieve. But there are images.
Are we setting this hypothetical story during the First World War?
It's
a very interesting, turbulent time.
I think that's where I'm going to aim.
I'm going to write that down first then. So First World War. I've just realised I could have written WW1 and saved myself some effort, but there you go.
So yeah, it's weird that it's often known, of course, as the Great War, before there was a second one.
That's true, yes. Great having different meanings to different people.
I think great in this meaning, it can mean both grand and large and,
Wonderful.
Yeah, I guess it can mean wonderful.
Well,
yeah.
some people did consider it to be wonderful. I think relatively recently you and I have both seen Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old.
Yes, which is an incredible work of art.
Eye-opening. For anyone who doesn't know, Peter Jackson and his team took footage from the First World War from the Imperial War Museum in London, and they took something like 6,000 hours worth of audio recordings of people, mostly men, who had fought in that conflict and had been a part of that conflict, and layered these audio recordings on top of these amazing images of the war that they had cleaned up. They had smoothed out the frame rate. They had colorized it. They had made it high definition. Absolutely astonishing.
Oh, the colorizing was... And the fact they made it widescreen and everything.
Well, there's that moment. We'll quickly talk about this before we move on.
No, it's fine. Go.
That moment. So, if anyone hasn't seen it, and I don't want to spoil it, but hey, you're going to see it at some point and whatever. So, the first.
Explain how it starts. Yeah.
Well, the first 10-15 minutes, surprisingly, because I'd heard so much about it, and I thought, oh, is this black and white? I thought it was meant to be coloured. So, 10-15 minutes of these quite small square aspect ratio videos sitting in the middle of your TV screen, at a quite high frame rate, people moving in that fast where they did in old-timey movies, of people back home in the UK signing up at these long lines to sign up for the war. Sign up isn't the right term, you know what I mean.
Enlist, yeah, there we go.
And then some also small square aspect ratio footage of people at the war, and about 15 minutes
I think it's basically at the moment the realities of the war start to hit.
Set in, they expand that small black and white square to fill the screen. As it expands, it colorizes, and the sound of the war enters into the theatre of it.
That's it.
Not just the recordings of the men, but their own sound effects they put on of artillery shells. And for me, and I said this to you at the time, it's the only time I've ever had my breath literally taken away by
it's
a
an incredible moment.
It's amazing.
It literally. I was on the edge of tears at that moment. I cried a
emotional.
number of times in that movie.
Absolutely.
Because just hearing it, but of course because it's narrated over by the voices. But what they also do as well is the sound effects, as you say, to sort of bring it to life, and also just they add in chatter where you can sort of hear partial conversations, and they probably made it up, most of it, or invented it, or did some lip reading. I think they did some.
They did a lot of lip reading
to try and get what these real people were saying. And got some actors to put the voices in, and it was incredible. So you felt it's the first time I've seen the First World War.
Well, I remember Peter Jackson saying that they really wanted to move away from that old-timey Charlie Chaplin style, everyone moves quickly, black and white footage that you cannot possibly relate to.
Yeah.
As soon as it's in essentially 24 frames per second, and it's in colour, and there are people like you and I, men of our age, talking and chatting.
You see their faces, and you go, I know that guy. I know that guy.
He could be anyone I know right now.
I know that guy. And it's just incredible. All of that is thanks to the amazing war photographers of the time.
Yes, which is a really good way of bringing us back into what
Precisely
we're talking about.
my plan.
Well done. But it also gives us a nice, turbulent platform upon which to build this hypothetical story.
So, yeah, I think let's talk about this as if it's a plot of let's say a movie, for simplicity.
Well, actually, let's say a historical drama.
I like that.
As if it's a real-life story.
Or like a serial, yeah.
And that we've said, okay, let's tell the story of this real-life person. So let's start with the individual.
Who is this journalist?
I would actually really like for it to be a woman, a female war photographer.
Okay.
The First World War and the Second World War were amazing times for women in the West, certainly in the UK. The men went off to fight, and suddenly the women were left doing everything else. every job under the
Yeah,
sun
yeah.
imaginable. So a female war photographer.
And there were a lot of there was female auxiliaries and stuff like that at this time.
There
Anyway,
were,
so
yes.
it makes a lot of sense. And it might be the sort of task that they were asked to do. So
Haven't you
never know.
mentioned you've had a relative who did this? A female relative?
Not in the First World War.
Second World War.
My grandmother was in the female auxiliary corps in the Second World War.
Yeah, we looked this up, didn't we?
Yeah.
We presumed that she
There's lots of supporting
served
roles.
in a kind of logistical,
Precisely.
aspect in France, probably on the front
I've,
lines.
yeah, and I've got some of her memorabilia knocking around, and but yeah, and weirdly, my granddad in that same war was a nurse, so they kind of gender bended the roles
Yes, a bit
little
of a
bit. Yeah.
non-traditional gendering. Yes,
And
I like that.
They met during that. I don't know how exactly. I
So
wish I
let's
knew a
say
little bit
then,
more about that
we've
story.
got this probably young lady who. What is she doing in England at the time when war breaks out? What is her life like?
Let's give her a fucking name.
Okay,
Ethel.
Ethel.
I like Ethel. That's very classic.
Classic era name, Ethel. Ethel
Gray.
Ethel Gray, love that. Gray is a great surname.
Gray spelled with an A.
That's exactly what I've written.
Which is, by the way, the American way of spelling the colour.
actual colour
Apparently,
grey.
it's more common.
It
Though
always
there's an
confuses me.
argument over it generally. So,
I'm fine with either one
Same.
for the colour. Yeah, okay.
like
Ethel
either and
Gray.
either, huh?
You can use either one.
Yeah. Anyway, so Ethel Gray. So how old is she at the in 1914?
17.
70. Oh fucking hell.
Because, I mean,
17.
so many of the people who were critical
Yeah.
to that war and that machinery at the time were at 16, 17,
So
18.
now let's say I'm immediately going. Did she have to pretend to be a man to get to where she is?
Oh, that's a classic story.
Did she have to, or was it unnecessary at the time?
Well,
I don't know.
Well, no, to get to the front lines, probably yes.
I'm gonna say
they
she
wouldn't
probably-
have let a woman go anywhere near the war unless
So
they thought
yeah,
she was
so
a man.
faked being a man. Yeah.
Okay, so she was 17 at the outbreak. So she
Yeah.
might have been, say, 18 by the time that, she's actually going to do these things.
Yeah. By
A
the
very
time.
young, impressionable woman.
Yeah, but maybe it's obviously happy to dress up as a guy, so short hair and all that kind of stuff. Probably had short back and sides.
Tapes her bosom down.
Yeah, classic.
How does she get the job? How does she get a job as a photographer that then gets sent off to the front
So
lines?
yeah, maybe what's her background before that?
I think she has a totally unrelated background. I've seen a few documentaries from, the BBC and Channel 4 and other people in the UK about the social times of people living, during the First World War and Second World War. And for women, there wasn't really much to do. You might have a job, so you might go work at a mill, for example, for a long time, and then you'd go back home and you'd make dinner for the rest of your family. Even if you were just a daughter, not even a wife, you'd probably be expected to be some kind of a matriarch for your family and provide and clean and cook and care for. So let's give her let's say she's from the north of England, because the north has a very proud industrial heritage.
Let's
Ethel Gray from
Yorkshire, apparently, from her accent.
right, she's from Yorkshire. Although we're
Yorkshire.
getting close to a Lancashire accent, but Yorkshire's fine.
Yorkshire.
It is the biggest county of the UK.
So Yorkshire, so a little bit.
Good Yorkshire lass. So actually, in a way, she don't take no shit from no one.
Yeah, I like that. So that stereotypical.
Gritty, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, northern soul. And she works at any number of places.
So maybe she actually, as you say, worked at one of the cotton mills that are all over Yorkshire. That's just
Love
full
it.
of them. Yeah,
Cotton
so
mill.
So
Cotton
worked
mill
at a cotton mill.
worker.
Worked.
And let's say she's a member of a large family.
Yes.
Married,
Catholic
father-
even?
Catholic or Protestant for the north.
Because Catholics have large families, tend to.
They could even be another denomination, Baptist, Presbyterian, but let's say Catholic.
Because your no contraception rule, so thus
Large families,
ginormous
yeah.
family. So it has like
Always struggled
7
to-
brothers and sisters.
Exactly, and always struggled to make herself known and be seen and be made aware of. So she's got that motivation to be someone, be something. So she works in a cotton mill in Yorkshire, and maybe at school she has a tiny opportunity to be creative, maybe a little bit of painting, maybe some needlework. So her creative outlet has been slightly ignited, and she knows that she'd like to do something on that front, but she becomes aware of the war,
Yeah.
Well,
the possibility of war in 1914, I think it's still really
let's say
early.
1914, yeah. And that triggers something within her. What would a young person in the UK think about the prospect of a European conflict?
Oh, it's pretty fucking crazy, but
Is it exciting?
I think it would be exciting. It certainly was for those guys at the time. Certainly for the men joining up. I don't know. Obviously, in her case, it must be similar. That sort of sense of the energy of like, we're going to defend our country. We're going to defend what we believe in. You know, these people believe something different, and this whole thing had been teetering on the brink for a long time. So it's not like they weren't know that there was the possibility of the two great the two great factions on either side.
Yes.
And there can't possibly be a war if there are two great factions balancing against each other. But
I have an imaginative idea here. I hope it's imaginative. Let's say, like the classic woman dresses as man story. She tries to join up, dressed as a man. She goes down to the local enlisting station, whatever it was called, and because it's local, they know her, right? And the guy says, "Oh, Ethel Gray,
always trying
I can
tricks.
see that was you from a mile off."
Yes,
so
Mr. Miggins the milkman.
Mr. Miggins the milkman is in charge of enlisting local folk, and he
Yeah.
knows it's her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really have time to travel to outside the region to join up somewhere else. So what can I do instead? And there's an advert in the local paper, the Derbydale Courier,
And the Derbydale, I like that.
which
yeah.
is Derbyshire, but never mind, doesn't matter.
Near Denbydale is in Yorkshire. That's what your
That's
confusion
very
is.
true. That's where I've got it from. Yeah. So she sees an advert in the paper for wanted a young lad to take pictures over in Europe of our brave troops heading out to war.
Our brave Tommies heading out.
So let's say she thinks that the job is, as it sounds like, simply to go over onto the mainland, continental Europe, and basically take some photos of men as they go off to the front lines, but she doesn't think she'll get sent to the front lines,
Yes.
which is what ends up happening.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So she wants an adventure. So let's talk about why does she want to do this? Why doesn't she want to take? I know there are many obvious reasons, but like in your imagination, why would she not want to stay safe at home?
Because safe is all she's ever known.
Mm-hmm.
If, as you said, if she's got 7 siblings, brothers and sisters, right?
Where does she sit in that? Is she the eldest, the youngest?
Middle.
Oh,
Middle
she's
ground, which is very difficult.
Yeah, so
my
she-
wife's
she-
a middle
she-
child. My dad was a middle child. It's
yes.
a very odd position, neither here nor there. And 7 of them as well. So you've got 2 loving parents, 7 siblings, and there you are in the middle, kind of neither noticed nor unnoticed. So staying safe is all she's ever known. She's always been in the middle, protected by people on that side, the older kids, protected on that side by the younger kids, sitting in the middle of a lovely
Yes.
family sandwich. So it's just a desire to do anything that's not what she already knows. And isn't that a drive for so many people?
Yes.
Or
yes.
drives almost everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So she's kind of looking for adventure, life, to build her career, to build her life, to build her... Yeah, to just discover who she is. So it's a kind of coming-of-age story we're telling here.
I really like that. Coming-of-age stories are really
Classic,
accessible.
yeah.
Classic, yeah.
So immediately at this point, so we're going in. Obviously there's an obvious antagonising force, which is the war. But
Yes.
I want to sort of drill it down to specific antagonists in her more local situation.
Personal antagonist, yes.
Probably one, if we can get it down. Who's is it? Another photographer, or is it the people trying to stop her being
Is it a
photographer?
military person who doesn't want her anywhere near it?
Yeah, and I think this military person, not because she's a woman, I don't think that should be the
It's
issue.
because the photos she takes and sends back home,
Are brutal.
yeah, and gives the people back home the wrong idea. And we were big on our wartime propaganda. The Americans were, look at the young plucky troops in the front lines. They're doing just fine. No one's dying. Don't look too much into it. Bye now.
Yes.
Right?
I love that. Yeah. So she does realistic. She does deadly realistic journalism, realistic photos.
Yeah, she maybe thinks that she can take some creative photos of plucky young men, but she realises very soon that her calling is to show the truth.
So what's the photo? The first photo. So is it of like no man's land, or is it of dead bodies lying in the trenches? What's that first photograph?
Okay.
That's a step too far for this commanding officer.
It's a group of young men, as they always were in this theatre. A group of young men standing around, smoking their cigarettes, drinking their drinks, and in the middle of them, in the mud, is a corpse of another young man.
Okay.
And it shows the two sides. Yes, we've sent off our lads to war, and yes, they're almost content, but in the middle of them, in the focus of everything, one of them's dead.
Yes, sort of half submerged in the mud and like
decaying a bit.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah,
and some of the guys are kind of half smiling, like they're, oh, we're at war, it's okay, isn't it? And the other half are like, oh, here's one of our friends.
And maybe there's
dead.
a commanding officer in the background, sort of doing some kind of prayer or something like that to show the
maybe fingering some rosary beads.
Yes.
Okay, let's write some of this down.
So I love this sort of like the idea of her having this sort of deadly photo that was super controversial at the beginning, and they're not happy about her sending it back, right?
Yes, in fact, the military intelligence stationed in the area is giving her express denial to send it back. They're saying you do not send it.
In fact, maybe they're not saying get rid of it or destroy it. They're saying send it to military intelligence instead of sending it
to the press back home.
To the press back
your
home.
paper back home. Yes,
and so that impetus drives her to then take more photographs of the brutality and the truth of war, right?
Yes, okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, so her first major pick is of young men, sitting around...
Kind of drinking to the...
Almost nonchalantly, let's say.
But slightly celebrating the death of their fallen comrade.
Yes, around, that's a good way of describing it, their fallen comrade. Or comrade.
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 That's not a normal way of speaking.
That's the way the Yorkshireman would say it, comrade.
Comrade. Aye. Right, so
let's give a to give a label to this. What's the name of the antagonist? The person who's
that's
trying
what
to
I was
stop her from
hoping we'd
military
get to.
intelligence.
So, what position are they in?
Colonel.
I like Colonel. Oh, aggressive.
Colonel always sounds pretty strict. Yeah.
I don't know, like Benjamin Hampton or something.
Either Benjamin I like, and the surname should include the sound Wick, like Wickham or Wick. Not
Borwick
or you Borwick, yeah.
Benjamin Borwick.
Yes.
Colonel Benjamin. Benjamin Borwick. Yeah.
Benjamin Borwick. Yes. Antagonist.
So let's talk about him a little bit.
So actually, maybe like the best antagonist, he's quite sympathetic in that he doesn't want people back home to know the horrors of war. He wants them to believe in their troops, send more young men out to help the cause, and just keep the status quo.
So what's his career? Is he long-standing?
He is bitter because he was a frontline commander who lost an eye or a leg, a limb, an appendage to the war, and now is, has to settle with being military intelligence and not fighting, but fighting the fight of the mind instead of the body.
Okay, so he's a little bit of military intelligence guy and sort of cracking down and saying, okay, so what's the first thing he does to stop her? Does he say, you're not allowed?
I think it's actually pretty ballsy. He tries to just send her home. This isn't your place. You're too young. Does he know she's a woman?
Not right away.
Not right away. Okay.
Okay, but we can have the classic. He slightly fancies her, but doesn't realise he fancies her, and is worried about being gay.
Yes,
right.
The classic Blackadder scenario with Bob. Yeah. Okay.
That's where I'm going with this.
Well, that's an interesting examination of the male psyche of the early 20th century, which was very socially structured and quite strict in its outward behaviour. And of course, there must have been so many people who had, what might have been described as sexually deviant or perverse thoughts and thought, what, it feels natural to me. So yeah, a small exploration.
He's a bit confused by
sexual confusion.
But that's what makes him extra aggressive against her as well, right?
Yes, okay, love that.
So he cuts in and so the first time he's like how does he try to send her home? Does he like put her on a boat? What kind of things does he do?
He tries to use legitimate military channels to sign in like an edict or an order, saying that this is that the front lines will no longer accept journalistic attachment.
So why does that fail?
Because she has to have agency. So she appeals to someone that it doesn't happen. Or let's say one of her other photos, contains some military intelligence that she sends over the head of Colonel Benjamin Bulwick. She sends it to, the major or the field commander behind enemy lines. And he says, this is good work. You've really got some good photographs here. You must stay on station.
We need you out in no man's land.
That's it.
So that kind of ups her role.
Exactly. So rather than being sent home as the colonel wants, she's actually sent even more into the thick of it.
Yeah, and happens to be working in the same... She's actually stationed, that's the wrong word.
Stationed is fine.
Stationed with military intelligence is what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah, attached to them.
Attached to military intelligence. So she's actually attached to his unit, right? Where he's going, so they're going out and spying on the German trenches.
Okay.
And during no man's land or whatever, to try and get, to help get actual intelligence on the German lines. So that's what she's forced to do. And she has to work with Bulwick. So we're pushing these people together.
Love that. And I was thinking, speaking of that then.
So that's the first plot point, by the way.
So let's say the first half of the story, for the antagonist Bulwick, he's trying to send her home.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there's this underlying subconscious attraction to her, which he
just doesn't know about. He just can't work it out.
When he maybe later on finds out that she's actually a woman, he discovers she's a woman, or discovers it for himself, and that he accepts the idea that he's attracted to her, maybe even in love with her. He's then torn between the idea of sending her home to protect her and keeping her there to be with her.
Yes.
And he's torn between, do I send her home? Do I keep her here? However, in that case, how do you maintain the antagonistic element? How does he still...
Oh, because she's not into him, right?
Oh, no. That makes
Surely
me really
not.
sorry for him.
Yeah. Because this guy, probably he's a little ugly. That's the obvious way of thinking about it. He's not a good-looking guy. But it's also, maybe he's just a dick, so she doesn't like him. He's a weaseling...
Yeah, personality friction.
I'm thinking Captain Darling from Blackadder, that kind of officious, a little bit officious.
A little too officious, yes.
A little bit too by-the-book sort of guy, and she's never... And, so he's a bit creepy, perhaps.
To her, yes.
Yeah, and maybe she gets on with some of the other guys. Maybe there could be a love interest.
Some of his lower orders.
But there could be a love interest, but it's not him, and that really grinds. So maybe around the midpoint of the story, maybe while they're out in no man's land... Right, he, and there's a battle, there's a shell, she falls down and somehow he finds out she's a woman. I don't know how that's obvious other than the boobs flopping out or something like that.
Yeah, her bindings break.
Yeah, without it being too egregious.
And too dirty and naughty.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be, yes. But somehow he finds out she's a woman, right? Or even, maybe she reveals to one of the other soldiers that she's maybe got a love interest with, that she's a woman secretly, and that person keeps the secret, like she's got a little ally, right?
Yeah.
So like at one of the Tommies or something like that. So let's think about some of the other characters. Who could be like her love interest, or who could be her ally in this situation?
Yes, a good, honest Tommy.
Oh, honest Tommy.
Good, honest Tommy. One of the ranks of common ranks of the infantry. But there's got to be something sparky about him, something which makes her, as a creative and independent type, attracted to him.
So, well, if she's sort of a photographer, maybe, do you want him to be, because there's two ways you could go. She's like him, she's obviously dying for danger, this person,
in a way, yeah, adventure.
Maybe he's kind of a little bit the opposite. Maybe he's a bit
more grounded?
Yeah, I was going to say grounded, but also kind of like not pleased about the horrors of war. She's kind of going to take her photograph. She's picked up the camera, She's running in there to take a photograph of the German trenches despite the machine gun fire.
Yeah.
But he is a little bit of, fuck that. I want to hang out in my trench and,
I know who he is.
Yeah.
He's a spiv.
A spiv!
Right? He sells...
Yes!
He sells everything he can to the troops, gets his hand wherever he can. Coffee, tobacco, bully beef, spam, whatever it might be. He tries to get porn, that's a big one. He tries to get his hand on it, and as much as he appears to be a happy-go-lucky, confident type of spiv, whatever you want, I got it, that is hiding his aversion to war. So when she goes out to the front lines, he's saying, no,
he's actually terrified for her. Yeah.
Oh, you stay with me in my trench. I'll sell the guys a few things. I'll give you a few cigarettes if you need them, whatever.
Tell you what, I can keep you away from the front lines. I skive off by hiding here when they go over the top.
So maybe, he's almost trying to make a normal life for them in the trenches.
So I'm already saying he's from East London and he's rough around the edges. Yeah, this guy.
Of course, all the Spivs were. Even if they weren't, they are culturally from East London.
Yeah,
the Cockneys, yeah. And so maybe actually, as much as she thought she was attracted to him for all his happy-go-lucky confidence, the fact that she sees through to a certain, dare I say, cowardice underneath, drives her more towards the Colonel, who, for all his opposition to her, is someone who goes out there and gets shit done.
Yeah.
And she admires.
So it's kind of like we've got, dare I say it, Hunger Games, the two love interests fighting each other.
Yes,
sort of thing.
the Twilight Triangle.
Yes, our Twilight Triangle in the First World War.
Yes, we have Ethel Gray. We have Colonel Benjamin Bulwick, and then we need the name of our Spiv.
The Spiv.
Mikey.
Oh yeah, I like Mikey Minchins.
Okay, so there's an implication of Germanic heritage there, which might not do him very well.
Yeah, Mikey Minchins. So yeah, maybe that's where he gets ripped on for being a bit German or something like that. People think he's a German spy, and so maybe together. What kind of things do they do together when they're hanging out in the trenches? Her and Mikey, because they're going to spend.
They sing classic music hall songs of London.
Of course, yeah. She takes photos of him. Probably.
She's Northern. She's Yorkshire, so he teaches her the most current music hall songs of London. And what does she give him in return?
Well, I think she takes photos of him and the lads.
I like
him
that.
and his mates,
yes.
right? So
and they do funny poses.
They do
for her.
stupid poses,
Okay.
silly things in front of her, and of course they think she's just one of the guys. And I think Mikey Minchins is probably the one who's first revealed that, unless it's Bulwick who finds out that she's a woman, and I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
That's really cool, keeping it like that.
Yeah. So she loves him. So then you've got a triangle. So Ethel fancies Mikey Minchins, and then Colonel Benjamin fancies Ethel. We've got a love triangle.
Yes, and the rest of Mikey's squad look down on him because you're getting very close to this bloke.
Oh yeah.
What does she call herself? What's her male pseudonym?
Oh, how do we not think of that? I mean, an obvious one's like Billy. You know?
Yeah, okay, we'll start with Billy. And then we need a really hardcore surname, really strong surname. Like Swathen. That's not
Swathen. Compton. Carruthers.
Carruthers. I like that. Yes, we have a good friend called Carruthers. So
that's a good point, yes.
Okay, Billy Carruthers. Where does she say she's from? Just Yorkshire, I guess.
I guess she says Yorkshire because of the accent. It's not. Why would you lie about that?
Just to speculate a little, because that's what we do. If this happened, if a woman really had gone out to the front lines wanting to be a man, what would be the greatest challenges facing her?
I guess it's the physical rough and tumble that men tend to engage in.
Mm-hmm.
Not all men engage in, of course, so she could play to be one of those men, yeah.
Keeping her identity secret would be a big one.
I think, and just because men wrestle each other and fight each other in war.
Yes, and there's that close contact.
And,
possible
strapping
breast feelings.
Again, that idea of taking your clothes off in front of other men, which men do and don't care so much. I guess the dirtiness. Maybe she's okay with that. This character seems like she's okay with the violence, the dirtiness so much.
Maybe there's also a challenge of fitting in with the male mindsets, and not just the physical side of it, but also kind of having to laugh along to their black humour jokes. Oh
yes, of course, the dirty male jokes about women.
Yeah, well, she doesn't think it funny, of course, but she knows she has to laugh along to keep in with them.
Well, of course, again, men talking love to talk about penises, love to talk about dicks, love to talk about the girls they fancy.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, blood, violence.
So that's probably going to make her comfortable, but she'll probably just. In my opinion, if she's committed to this goal, she'll probably go along with it and join in, maybe even to some extent. But it'd probably find it maybe initially difficult.
What about the down and dirty necessities of womanhood?
Oh, Jesus Christ, I hadn't even thought of that, yeah.
How does she deal with that? To be honest,
it happened a lot, so...
It did, yeah. I mean, there was lots of medical bindings, triage tapings and
I don't think that would be a problem finding the materials.
But kind of doing it in secret.
Yes, that is the difficult. I think the whole thing of keeping her physicality secret is going to be difficult.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. Okay. So, what would be the end game to this story? Let's try and get to the end of it, right? What would happen to Ethel? Does she survive? Does she go home? It's
the First World War. She dies.
Oh. Does she at least die in the arms of, her the colonel who she grows to love, or, Billy who she used to love but has grown distant from?
So I like the idea of it's somewhere, maybe they're out in no man's land, right?
Yes.
And there's a wonderful moment where they're all shelled. Maybe the colonel dies. Or maybe Mickey dies. I'm not sure.
Mickey dies, the colonel survives.
But the colonel's super injured, and they're both super injured, and they're stuck in a trench. And you have this really long scene of them talking in the trench and revealing all, and talking about their insecurities, their worries, while they're stuck in the trench.
Real openness.
Just before they, the Germans come upon them and finish them,
Oh, so it's just simple, brutal as it was.
I think you have to be with the First World War. I think you can't have that brutal reality that everyone dies at the end.
It was fine. We're going to follow this cool person. Aren't they cool?
I think they just go out to the German trenches and they're on this sort of photography spy mission, and it all goes horrendously wrong.
Yeah.
But the uptick at the end of the movie, right, is her photography when it comes back.
Ah.
Right? It opens up the war, right?
It changes public perception of the war.
Precisely. And they get to see the bad side of the war, and her photography changes the world, I think that's the uptick, is just her work, her art, all her photography of the trenches and the dead people in the trenches and the Tommies in the trenches and their
even
suffering.
maybe the more positive stuff, like a group of guys hanging out.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
The whole story. And it ends up she's included in They Shall Not Grow Old. Maybe
I like
she was
that.
one of the
Okay, so I'm going to write down that her posthumous photographs changed the public perception of the war. So, what might be the most difficult part of this?
Oh.
Giving it a name.
Oh crap!
If this was written as a kind of war novel or a
war movie,
film, what would it be called? Photographs of No Man's Land.
Oh, that's just too on the nose. It's
Pictures
of nowhere.
Pictures of nowhere. Fucking love it. It's beautifully pretentious as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
so there ends the movie, Pictures of Nowhere.
I quite like that, I feel quite a connection to this lady.
So yes, thank you, Ethel. It's been nice getting to know you. By the end of the war, I think she died a year before the war finished.
Okay.
So probably it's 1917, roughly, something like that.
Yeah.
So she was like maybe 19, so it's pretty fucking sad.
Yeah,
Kid,
but
basically.
She knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
And she knew what she wanted to be doing.
She felt her dream and was a great photographer, and met some interesting people along the way.
Yes, better a life lived in adventure and death than boredom and sustainability.
Yeah, just being
existence.
fat and bored and lonely.
Yes, working in mill.
Yes, so an interesting life away from England, in the mud and the torture.
And helping to illuminate subjects and tell people about something, right?
Yeah.
That's worthwhile.
All right, thank you so much this week. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for listening to Ethel's story. Hopefully you guys will happily take photos in her memory, even though it's a fake memory.
Well, I'd like to ask the audience, what's your favourite photo you've ever seen? Maybe your favourite photo you've ever taken as well. We all take photos on our phones, so you must have a favourite one or something you really like. Tell us about that.
What's your favourite war? Do you have a war that you enjoy?
The Great War, the best war. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter, and you can find us on our website, thespeculationstation.com.
Also, all the fancy places you can get podcasts like iTunes, Stitcher, G-Podder, wherever you can think of, all of those.
You'll find us.
Yeah.
Google's always there.
Use the fucking internet, you twats.
Oh, you twats.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, we'll see you twats next time for another object, another discussion, more speculation, and hopefully another great story about someone like Ethel Gray.
Yes. All right, guys. Take care. See you next time.
Bye.
Speculation Station.